Hey friend, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here listening to another episode of the Pattern Design Circle podcast. Here we talk all about the ins and outs of designing knit and crochet patterns and running a business that makes it all possible. I'm Jessica, your host, knitting pattern designer, design mentor, and the friend in your ear. Can't wait to dive right in. The Pattern Design Circle podcast is sponsored by the Pattern Design Circle, a membership community for knit and crochet pattern designers that are feeling lost, lonely, or frustrated in their business. It connects you with a supportive community that's always eager to answer your questions and help you through the hard times. And there's loads of resources and activities specifically catered to business and designing. Sound like your jam? Check it out at snickerdoodleknits.com/design-circle. That's snickerdoodle, like the cookie, knits, knits.com/design-circle. All right, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Pattern Design Circle podcast. I am so excited, as always, to be here chatting in your ear. So today we are continuing our series of podcast episodes all about planning. And I know at this point you might be like, all right, why are we talking so many things like planning prep, things to keep in mind when planning, all of these things, and we're not talking about the actual planning yet. I can totally understand why you might be feeling frustrated. I can see how, might just be anxious to like, all right, let's just plan already. But it's very intentional, and it's because I think these things are really important to consider when planning. So I've maybe kind of touched on this in other episodes in this series, but I love planning. I love goal setting. I just get so excited, want to plan out all the things and do all the things and, figure out how I'm going to do it and yada, yada, yada. And I'm not as good at the prerequisite pieces that really make the planning aligned and authentic, intentional, focused, and all of those things. Which I know, yes, ironic because it's so important to me that everything's aligned and authentic. And so that is, part of why in one of the episodes, I know I mentioned, like maybe this is something where come back and revisit, make sure this still feels good. And it wasn't just a all out of excitement kind of thing. Maybe that's a week later, maybe that's 3 weeks later, maybe it's 6 weeks later, whatever it is for you. Anyway, so today we are talking about money goals, and are money goals the best way to plan? Now, of course, with everything I always say, you do you, boo. I think it's super important that you know yourself, know what works for you, know what's important to you. Money goals absolutely may be the best way to plan for you, but spoiler, I don't think they are for all of us. So let's first talk about like what money goals are, how really traditional business planning is set up, what it looks like, how it's taught, and what some alternatives might be for that, and things to consider as you're planning 2024 in a way to really make it a year that resonates with you, that you are setting up intentionally, authentically, and aligned, all that stuff. So money goals, if you've taken any sort of workshop, course, class, webinar, challenge, all of those things from a business mentor all around planning, goal setting, any of these things, especially around the new year, you most likely learned goal setting and planning from perspective of money goals. So the way that it's often taught for annual planning is that you start with your money goal, what you want to make in the year. So let's say I wanted to make, I'm going to try to use clean numbers here, and I'm writing it down as I talk so I don't forget what I say. But let's say that I decide that I want to make $100,000 in income, in profit for 2024. So that would be kind of like the big money goal that I'm aiming for. Then I would need to know what my expenses are in my business. Use the expenses from the past, use what you're planning for the future. So let's just say I have 100K, 100,000 in expenses for 2024. Anticipated. I also recommend, including a contingency in there because you don't know what's going to come up, things like that. But so that would mean that I need to make $200,000 in 2024. So then the way that it's taught is, of course, all right, so let's break this down into all of the pieces of your business to know what's contributing to what, right? So let's say my business is all patterns and coaching, or maybe classes or whatever, teaching kind of stuff. And let's say that my profit division, my income, it is split 50-50 between the two. So then I know that I want to make 100,000 in patterns and I want to make 100,000 in coaching and teaching. And so then you break that down into, all right, so how do I make that 100,000 in my patterns? Last year I made 80,000. I didn't, by the way. This is all theoretical numbers. Last year I made 80,000 by doing, all of this stuff. Release these patterns. These are the patterns that did best. If I added these 2 more promotions and this one, additional pattern launch this year, I feel confident I can get 100K in patterns. And then for coaching, say last year I said it was 50-50. So I made 80,000 there. Here's some ideas for how I could increase that for 2024. Now, one thing that I really love, somebody shared recently, I don't remember exactly what it was, but she was like, when we're setting goals and we're trying to do better than the year before, remember that you're starting, like revenue-wise, you're starting at 0 again. So it's not necessarily easy to make that money again, the same amount of money again. If you've been doing it consistently, that you're confident about what you're doing and what works, what doesn't work, yada yada. But it's not a guarantee. And so doubling your revenue isn't necessarily an easy task. Things like that. Anyway, so then of course, then you decide, all right, so then this is everything that I need to do this year. These are the launch dates I want to use. These are the people I want to collaborate with, and then plan out quarterly, monthly, all the things. And I think my brain loves planning this way because it is so logical. It's all numbers based, mathematical. It's like, all right, yada, 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 this is going to work this way. In reality, for me, it's never worked the way that I put the numbers together. And so then that leads to frustration. So if you've done the same, if you felt the same, totally feel you. You are 100% not alone. One other thing, sometimes people are like, whoops, sorry, I should put that marker down. Sometimes people are like, just pull out a number that feels good. What do you want to make? Yada, yada. If you are using money goals, I 100% recommend not just pulling out a number. I guess you can try. I just shouldn't say 100%. I personally think that it is more helpful, more like enticing, more motivating, and more realistic if you take a look at what your expenses are. So I said, like, I want to make 100K and have 100K in expenses in my business. Of that 100K that I'm making, maybe that's all for my family expenses. Maybe my income is all going towards paying for private school for my kids, whatever. I don't have kids, but anyway, um, but knowing how much money you need to make in your business in order to fund the things in your life, that's super important. Also looking at past years. How has your money been? What has your income actually been? What has your profit been? And what is realistic? So if I made $1,000 last year and I want to do things pretty similarly, but I want to make $100,000 this year, I'm sorry, that sounds extremely unrealistic to me. So if you do go the money goal route, think about what's realistic. Think about how much you actually need to make. If you are depending on your business at all for money, knowing how much money you need to make is super important, and it's valuable to track your money throughout the entire year. If you're depending on your money, it's extremely important. Yeah, so you don't, end up in a bind where you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't make the money. Um, anyway, so that that's kind of traditionally the idea of how money goals have worked, have been taught, all of the things. Now, is that the best way to plan? I think if your business is extremely money centric, if your goals, your value in your business, if your definition of success is very strongly connected to money, maybe yes. Maybe it makes a ton of sense. If you are running a corporation with hundreds, thousands of employees, money goals are going to be super important. Now, what I have seen is a lot of times in our industry with the folks that I have mentored, the money goals aren't exactly the most important thing. Some of them are like some business owners are like, um, this is just my extra money. It doesn't really matter how much I make. I'm just doing this for fun. But I want to do my best in it, and I want to put my best foot forward. I want to, put effort into this, and um, but it's not, I don't care about the money. Some people are like, I'm making the money to cover yarn. I know that I spend this much in yarn every year. I would like to be able to cover that with my income from my business. And then, of course, we have other people who are like, all right, no, I really need to make this amount, or I really want to make, and that's super valuable. That's amazing. If that's what works for you, keep planning that way. I think it's also possible to have kind of a combination where maybe that's not your initial motivator, your initial goal that you're planning for, but it's something that is valuable that you do need to plan for. 100%. I'm still going to do money goals. I'm still going to plan out, all right, how is this going to work? But I don't want to make that kind of like my big motivator or my big definition of success. I really want to pay really close attention to some other metrics about, all right, what's the impact I'm making on my audience? What's the value that I'm providing? What's the, how am I cultivating community? How am I empowering people? And am I doing things every month, every quarter, whatever it is that I decide on, that are actually moving that needle forward? Because those are the things that feel more valuable to me. And again, I've shared this before. I'm in an extremely, extremely privileged position where I'm not depending on my business income for anything in my personal life. So anyway, that's where I'm coming from. Okay, so I kind of give examples of what we might choose as other goals. Maybe your big goal is you want to design 30 patterns this year. Maybe your big goal is that you want to submit to 10 third-party publishers. Maybe it's that you want to have 10 patterns accepted from third-party publishers. So let's break down each of those scenarios a little bit, what that can look like as far as planning. If we say we want to design 30 patterns this year, think about, all right, what goes into designing a pattern? What does that look like? Is that reasonable for me? How much time does each of those patterns look like? I would break down 30 patterns into what those patterns are. So are they, say, 10 cowls, 10 sweaters, and 10 socks? I know for myself, looking at that, I'm like, 10 sweaters, I don't think I'd be able to do that in a year. But maybe for you, you can. Maybe, I've only published 2 sweater patterns. I think, yeah. So, maybe for you, it's like, it's not that big of a deal. Crank it out, whatever. Maybe you have somebody who does all of your grading for you, so that's not a big deal either. Maybe you have somebody else who knits your samples, things like that. So if we split up, all right, what's kind of like the division within that big goal? And then, I would look at the complexity of each of those designs. So if it's all over brioche for all 10 sweaters, for me, that would take a little bit longer to knit and to design. Anyway, so, look at the complexity of it, and then you can really figure out, okay, how much time does each of these take? Know what goes into your workflow. Make sure you have, if you don't already have systems and procedures for your pattern design process, 100% recommend, and for your pattern publishing process. What that looks like is that, just have all of your steps. Part of the idea of having SOPs, systems and procedures, all outlined is because then you can hire somebody and tell them, hey, this is what to do. But I find it also significantly makes things smoother and more quick for myself working through them. I don't have to worry about, okay, am I missing something? Think through it, whatever, every single time. No, I just have the whole checklist for all of them, just work through it, and it, it's done. So I would, look at, okay, exactly how much time is this going to take? What do I need? Who do I need to reach out to? Who do I want to collaborate with? When you're pattern designing, I always work with a yarn company that I collaborate with. So I need to contact them in advance that we can talk about colors, yada, yada, yada. I can get the yarn. I can start swatching. I can design the pattern. I can knit the sample. I can write the pattern. I can do the test knitting and the tech editing, then the test knitting, and then the actual publish it. And so that can take time. So if you want to get 30 patterns in this year, you need to think about, okay, what does that timeline look like? You don't want to wait until June to start designing these 30 patterns, most likely. If it's, 30 granny squares, that might feel a little bit different for you. But, and then, look at, all right, so who do I need to talk to, but also what resources do I need to gather? Maybe if I'm wanting to incorporate a new thing, I will need to learn this thing. Maybe I decide, okay, in order to make this happen, I need to talk to another tech editor so that I can send my stuff to 2 different tech editors because I know my tech editor has a lot on their plate. Maybe you decide to go ahead and hire a sample knitter for 5 of those sweaters. Whatever it looks like. Taking a look at it right now beforehand is going to help you in actually achieving that. It's going to help things feel more smooth. You're just going to feel more in control and organized on top of things. And then, yeah. So then if you wanted to then turn that into a money goal, I would look at, okay, how much am I making per cowl release? How much am I making per sweater release? How much am I making per sock release on average? Do I expect these to be higher or lower? And then how much am I making on all of my existing patterns? Put that all together. That's going to give you an idea of your income for the year. Well, it's going to give you an idea of how much money you bring in for the year. And then, of course, account for expenses, and you have your profit. So that would be the money. And then if you're like, oh, this isn't going to be enough, you'll probably want to think about, okay, what are different ways that I can market this? What are promotions that I might do to increase that? What's something else I want to do on the side? The other thing, when you're thinking about these pattern releases, make sure you include everything that you do for the pattern release when you're thinking about time. If you write blog posts, if you record tutorials, if you record other videos about it, whatever it is, make sure you remember all of that in the time outline that you're thinking of for how long everything takes. Like if you don't usually record a tutorial, but 5 of these sweaters are going to need 3 tutorials each, that's going to be time recording those 15 tutorials, editing them, posting them, yada, yada, yada. Alrighty, so that was 30 patterns. One that I had said was that if you wanted to decide you wanted to submit to 10 third-party publishers, the main way that I would think about that, kind of break it down, is like, what do I, how do I make sure that I actually have 10 submissions that I can submit? So I would start with, all right, how many lists am I on for calls for submissions? How many, calls do they typically put out? Like if you're on 2 lists and they put out 1 call a year, you only have 2 calls for submissions to submit to, and you need to find more people that you can submit to. So make sure that you have plenty of opportunities. Consider, all right, out of all the calls that I see, how many do I actually submit to? How many am I actually interested in that feel good and aligned? Maybe 50%. So then I would want to make sure that I have at least 20 calls that I'm seeing in the year to be able to submit my 10. And then the other one was we have 10 submissions accepted per year. Break that down. Another step into, all right, how many of my submissions are accepted? If say 50% of them are accepted, now I'm going to want to have 40 calls that I'm seeing so that I can submit to 20 of them and receive 10 of them. And personally, I'm a little bit risk adverse, so I would probably I'd probably want to submit to a little more than that, a little more than 20, because what if things just aren't working out right? So I might submit to 25 or 30. Yeah, so, and then, if you turn that then into a money goal, maybe you need to make a certain amount of money. Look at, all right, these are the publications that I really love working with. These are the publications that I would love to work with. This is how much they charge for, how much they compensate for a cowl. This is how much they compensate for socks. This is how much they compensate for a sweater. If I have 3 socks, 3 sweaters, and 4 cowls, this is how much money I'd be compensated from these people. Does that align with what I need, what I want? Or should I do more sweaters? Things like that. So, and then of course, consider your time. Make sure it feels realistic, that you'll actually have the time to make all of those submissions and follow through on the work for them. And then of course, like I kind of mentioned, the position that I'm coming at instead for 2024 is going to be more like, all right, my goals are maybe a little less concrete. They're more like providing value. All right, now what are the kind of those branches that I'm going to do that? What does that look like specifically? What are the things that I'm going to do to cultivate community? What are the things that I'm going to do to empower people? And it's interesting because I feel like this will probably lead me to more into a place of I don't know, a place that feels easier to achieve the goals because it's like all set out to do these things. Like I'm going to host this event or I'm going to give this freebie or, things like that. And so in a sense, I tend to be like, that kind of feels like cheating. Like I haven't ever loved like goals where it's like, all right, I'm gonna design 3 patterns or I'm going to um post on social media 3 days a week or things like that because for me, that was something where um I was like, I know if I say I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. Like I I'm a personality that has, um, I don't know, I hold my expectations. I meet my expectations. I do the things that I say I'll work to make sure it gets done kind of thing. And so before those kinds of goals didn't resonate with me. And now I'm like, ooh, wait, like maybe I can actually feel more successful. But I like the reframing for myself. And this is like, if those goals resonate with you, that's amazing. Please do it. I'm just sharing my experience in case you feel similarly, or somebody else listening to this feels similarly, and it helps them. So this reframe of being like, okay, what's really important to me is providing value. What's really important to me is empowering uh, pattern designers. And so then it's like, it's not just checking off boxes per se because it feels like there's something greater behind it. It's not just doing the task, but it's kind of like what is actually the meaning behind it. And I guess maybe before I felt like the meaning behind things was supposed to be the money. And like I knew that it wasn't, but it was like in goal setting, in planning, in all that kind of stuff. It was like I kind of treated it that way. So anyway, yeah, so that's my thoughts on money goals. Like I said, I've absolutely loved planning that way, but it just hasn't worked amazingly. Like it just hasn't been a big incentive for me. I know it's not a big motivator for me, and yet I beat myself up over not achieving those things, even though they're not really aligned and authentic, but that's like the thing that business owners do. And I know it feels probably sounds silly. Like I'm so big on talking about authenticity and alignment and all this stuff. And sure, like those money goals, like they sound so fun. And like, okay, yeah, I can do this, and this with it. And I can donate to these people and all of this stuff. But it just mm, feels like it never was quite right. So I'm really excited to try it differently this year. I would super love to hear what you think. What are your thoughts? Do you still love money goals? Is that the way that you're doing? Have you been planning differently for a while? Um, yeah, I mean, like I've I've also, I guess I shared this in another episode, but I basically like, I had set a million goals. So it's like I had the big money goal, but I also had, like all of these things I'm going to launch. And I had all these marketing goals and I had all these KPIs I was going to reach, which are key performance indicators. Um, so things like how many subscribers on your email list, how many followers on your Instagram, how many views, all that kind of stuff. Um, so I've had a million goals, but it always kind of felt like the money goal was supposed to be the biggest one, I guess, because I'm a business owner trying to make money. And yeah. So anyway, I feel like for myself, money goals are not the best way to plan. I've known that for a while. Last year, I kind of tried to like when planning for 2023, I tried to think about it differently, but it still felt like there was a lot of emphasis on the money and like how this is going to work out. Um, so I'm really excited to take it really from this kind of emotional perspective of, like that's the space that I live in. That's the space that really resonates with me and see how that goes. So would love to hear from you. how you plan to plan 2024, what's worked for you in the past, what doesn't, if you're excited to try something a little bit different. And I will chat very soon with our next podcast episode, still about planning. Wow, thanks so much for listening to this episode. If you found it valuable, please share the podcast with a designer friend. And if you have a minute, leave a review. It's so helpful for me and means the world to me. Chat soon.